coffee, big cup, and hello. Welcome to a very special episode of the Gilmore Way Podcast. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to be digging into, pun intended, one of the most important characters on the show, food. And we're going to be looking at the roles that eating plays on the show and what interactions with food says about our characters. Joining us this week for this conversation is Larisa from Eating Gilmore. We're so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the Eating Gilmore project you started?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, both of you, for having me on. So my name is Larisa. I am behind the account Eating Gilmore. This is a project where I essentially create a dish, whether that's food or drink, inspired by every episode of Gilmore Girls. I started back towards the end of 2020, and I am making my way through season 7 right now. So it's really crazy to think about wrapping up pretty soon.
Wow.
How did you get the idea to even start something like that? How did it hit you? Where was the inspiration?
Yeah. So if we go back to 2020, we're all, in quarantine. So kind of was looking for a hobby, a passion project, so to speak. And earlier in that year, I discovered a creator by the name Brad Bakes. And at the time, he was cooking his way through the Harry Potter series. And so I just thought that was really cool and creative. And so it kind of just stuck in the back of my mind. And knew of another series that I really love that had a lot of food in it, as I'm sure we'll get into more today. And just decided this could be a fun little project. Maybe I'll do it for a couple of episodes. And now here I am, season 7. Like, I still can't believe that I've made it this far.
Yeah. Well, please, obviously you're going to finish, but please keep going. Your episodes and your recipes are delightful. And I've just seen so many of them that I am just like itching to try and recreate for myself. So, it's a really clever idea of what you have done. And I'm just glad that you kept on with it and that it was more than just a few episodes, because you've got such an audience now that I think also just very much collectively appreciates it and like loves everything that you do.
Well, thank you. It's definitely something that I'm still getting used to, because I really was just like, wow, if I can get, a few people beyond just my friends and family, cheering me on, that would be really cool. And to now have this like whole community is really, really special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's been like the most satisfying or like the best part of this project for you?
So I guess I kind of have 2 answers for this. So satisfying, I think, is just, again, making it this far. I really didn't think I was going to make it all the way to the end. And I think, there's been a couple of dishes that have really given me some struggles. So when I do finally get it right, that feels really good and really satisfying. But probably the best part is about just meeting the community, meeting other people who love this show as much as I do. All these years later, getting to talk to people through podcasts. I know you guys recently had an episode about the Fan Fest, so I've gone to that the last couple of years, which was really fun and special to get to not only meet fans, but people that worked on the show as well. I think the Gilmore Girls community is very unique compared to a lot of other shows and movies that are out there.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about, is it that like about Gilmore Girls that makes it so unique and that it holds up after all these years of being off the air and that keeps people coming back to watch it?
I think just the comfort of it all, right? Like we always compare it to like a warm blanket, all the cozy fall feelings are just very it feels like a best friend, right? Like it's someone that you can connect with year after year. I know some people watch it every fall. Some people like me watch it every day. So I think it's just that really familiar, comforting nostalgia. But I also think, like it's not super dramatic. Like not everyone's dying every other episode like Grey's Anatomy. Like it's pretty low stakes, but like the drama is fun and engaging. And I think in terms of the community is that there's such different opinions and thoughts, right? Like everyone always asks, what team of Rory's boyfriends are you on? And that's like a huge debate even to this day. So I think that's part of the other reason why the community is so strong, is that we can have these kind of discourses about the show, but it's not anything that's like super high stakes or anything like that.
Yeah, it feels a lot more relatable. People can't always relate to, you know, being an ER doctor, but they absolutely can relate to family drama at dinner or at holidays. So that's so true. I mean, I guess speaking on that, like what team are you on?
Yeah, we were going to save this question for a bit more into the episode, but now that you brought it up, we both knew we were going to instantly ask. So choose carefully.
Well, I do have a very, I guess, canned answer, but it is true in how I believe. And honestly, I could probably write an entire dissertation on this answer. So truly, I don't think any of them are really right for Rory. I think they're right for her in that moment in her life. I think all three, if you do the three, are very necessary in her character development. They all taught her lessons. I think they're all equally flawed. I think some get more hate than others, more hate, I think, than they deserve. But I do think that every single one of them is vital to Rory's growth. Even though that might backslide a little bit in the year in the life, but I don't know. I just have a hard time picking one, because I don't think long term and into adulthood that they're really right for her. So that's kind of my cheating answer. It's not really an answer.
It's very diplomatic. Yeah. We had a whole like 2-part episode debate about it. So I love that it's 2023 and we're still talking about this like it matters.
Exactly.
So it's one of those fun questions. Everyone's got an opinion.
Yeah. Exactly. Would you say the thought process is the same for Lorelai's men? Like, or do you have more of a clear-cut standout guy there where it's like, yeah, I'll put my money down on this one?
So my opinions on Lorelai's men kind of actually have more recently evolved over the last couple of years, and really kind of digging in a little bit deeper to the show than I normally do. And this is kind of controversial, but I don't actually think Luke is right for Lorelai. I think they work really, really great as friends. I think their chemistry is a lot better, and that like tension buildup in the earlier seasons. But I just don't think, and, you know, just finishing season 6 in my project and watching those episodes a lot, where kind of everything comes to a halt and it explodes. I don't think they have healthy communication skills to be a successful couple. So I don't necessarily have a top pick for Lorelai outside of that. I think if we had gotten to see more episodes and more screen time, Alex might kind of have a top contender. I think that, you know, he was a really great guy. We only got a few episodes with him. So I kind of I can't say him for sure because I don't have enough content to like definitively say that. Yeah, I'm not really Team Luke anymore. And I know that's controversial.
I completely understand where you're coming from. And I have like a similar feeling about him where I'm like, are they actually like good at being a couple or good at being mature and having conversations about anything? Because even by the revival, you can see that like for 9 years, they've put off some pretty major conversations, and now it feels like too little too late. So I'm like, why are we like holding this up as the one true pairing of the show when clearly there's already like problems there?
Exactly.
I will say that out of all of Lorelai's men, I think they had the most solidified and strongest friendship.
Yes.
I think she was even always a better and stronger friend to Luke than she even was with Christopher. And that's always a good place to start with a relationship, but it doesn't mean, and it's a good building block for any relationship, but it doesn't mean that it's going to equate to a successful one or one that should lead to any sort of romantic involvement. So I would concur too. There are certainly arguments to be made that they are wonderful friends. And I think that is a lifelong friendship, but it didn't mean that they had to necessarily get together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think because he is like basically Stars Hollow personified, and she's never going to leave Stars Hollow. Like he's kind of the only person who's kind of right for her in that way, where it's like, well, this is comfortable and it's here. As opposed to, we mentioned this in our episode about the Battle of the Boyfriends. Like, can you see Jason moving to Stars Hollow and fitting in Lorelai's house? No.
And I've never really been a fan of Jason. I think he was too much from Richard and Emily's world for them to really work. Max kind of grew on me a little bit. Again, I don't think they would have made it long term, kind of for those same reasons. Like, I don't think he could live in Stars Hollow. I mean, maybe eventually, but I think they needed to date for a lot longer before jumping into marriage.
Mm-hmm. All good points.
Yep. I'm going to steer us back to food a little bit more now. And again, just circling back to your project. So out of everything that you have done so far, you indicated already that there have been some recipes or some dishes that have, tripped you up a little bit. What's been the hardest or most challenging dish that you've had to create? And following that same question up, are there any drinks that you've tried to create that have been either really fun and easy, or again, ones where you're just like, that challenged me?
Food-wise, the thing I think I struggled with the most was the tassel hat cake from Lorelai's graduation. Just getting that right shape. I struggled with. I think it took me a total of 5 times. So that one I think is probably my most difficult. Drinks wise, I haven't really had any of those that I struggled with. I didn't make the Rory because that did not sound appealing to me. I'm not a huge fan of pineapple juice to begin with, but it just was not a cocktail that would be up my alley. So I didn't make her birthday cake for that episode. So I haven't really struggled drinks wise, but there's also been ones that I have purposefully avoided.
Can you highlight some of those?
Ones that I've avoided?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. I don't know off the top of my head, but there's definitely been, there's been some episodes where I'm definitely torn between a couple of things. And then there have been episodes where I have tried to avoid things. So that one obviously comes to mind. The episode that I just did this yesterday was Lorelai's first Scatelli, and I made a fancy PB&J. And there was some, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but there's some fancy French dish that I definitely was not going to attempt. I have the infamous snails episode coming up, so not sure on that one, probably not doing that. There's an episode, I think in season 1, when Max and Lorelai are first starting to date, and he makes also busco, which is like a traditional Italian dish, but there's a lot of like meats and stuff in that. Oh, you like it?
Oh, yeah.
She's Italian.
Okay, well, that makes sense. But I was a little intimidated for that one, especially when I was just starting out with the project. Let's see. There was one that I had, but I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, so there hasn't been too many that I've avoided. It's usually there's one that I'm a little bit more excited about, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So not the buttery gummy bears. That's not appealing.
Yeah. They've had some weird stuff that I'm just like, oh no, we're good.
The tequila cactus chicken.
I don't know. That I feel like could be good.
Promising for sure.
Yeah.
So just a more general question, sticking with food. As you work through all of these recipes and watching all of these episodes, how do you think that food is portrayed on the show? Is it portrayed in a healthy way, an unhealthy way? Talk about how you see it represented.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is definitely a complicated answer. I'll kind of start with just in a general sense. I always say that I think food is kind of its own character on the show. It's incorporated a lot more than you see in just about any other show. Not necessarily, I mean, yes, with how much Lorelai and Rory eat, but also just two of the main characters are chefs with Sookie and Luke. The central reoccurring conflict with Friday night dinner revolves around food. So I think that right there, it's such an integral part of the show. I think that it does get kind of complicated with, they obviously don't have the best and healthiest eating habits. I think that's kind of a two-sided or a double-edged sword, because on one side you could argue, especially in the early 2000s, that was almost unheard of. Early 2000s was very, very ingrained diet culture. Like, we don't eat. So I think that was like a very positive difference. But at the same time, like, they're obviously not promoting the healthiest of eating choices with, junk food, going out all the time, takeout. Obviously, that's not like a healthy lifestyle. So I think, you can make arguments for both sides of the depiction. I think what is hard is, obviously, the two main girls, Alexis and Lauren, are very thin. They're traditional. They have that skinny privilege. So I think, for their eating habits, their body image probably doesn't necessarily match up. But I mean, it could, right? They could have a super high metabolism. I think they were pretty, I hate to say it, progressive for the time for having Melissa McCarthy in her role. We didn't see a lot of plus size actresses in a main role in that day and age. And being a chef and, making really great food, I think that was fairly rare at the time. So I will give them props for that. But yeah, that's a really complicated question. So hopefully I answered it okay.
Yeah. Again, it was meant to be just like give us your basic general thoughts, because that can and will constitute its own episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. The diet culture of it all. Because, the show came out at a time when dieting was a hellscape of how to lose 100 pounds quick. And, magazine covers just messing up your sense of self. We'll get more into that in our diet culture episode coming up next week. But I tend to agree that it was oddly progressive, but also just kind of messed up in its own way. And it pushed against the predominant message of the time, but it went so far in the opposite direction that it teetered over too far on the other end and just was unhealthy in a different way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you have any favorite food moments on the show, or any meals you would have liked to be at?
Oh, for sure. I think the Bracebridge dinner is a really fun episode. It's one of my favorites. Just all of the, I guess, old-timey food, I think, is really fun. Oh, that's another one that I avoided. There's like a peacock pie or something, and that sounded really scary. So I just made butternut squash soup. I was like, I'm going to go the safe route here. I think, really, honestly, if I could just have a meal at the Dragonfly front with Sookie, that would be the dream. I think people ask me a lot of time, would you rather eat at Sookie's or Luke's? And I say Sookie's every time. All of my favorite dishes that I've made for the most part have been Sookie inspired. I think she's just a little bit better. Luke is simple, but I think she's just a little bit better of a cook. So I think that would honestly be my dream, is anything she makes.
You mean you don't want to try a Santa burger?
Oh, I have, and it's disgusting. That was probably one of my least favorite things I've made.
Yeah, that's just for show, not for eating. Exactly. Yeah, not the best combination of toppings on that burger.
No, for sure. And I don't even really like ketchup, so I was kind of screwed going into it.
It's blasphemy to me because I love ketchup, but okay.
I know, it's a hot take.
Fair enough.
Well, let's contrast this again. I'm just gonna steer us back to now, maybe just a fun GG question for you.
Sure.
Favorite Friday night dinner moment?
I think I have a couple, but what first came to, well, obviously my ultimate favorite is the big fight in Friday Night's All Right for Fighting with all the camera angles. That's one of my favorite moments of the entire show. I think it's just showcasing that core force acting abilities like no other scene really does. And you're just kind of on the edge of your seat the whole time. But in terms of like a sweet moment, I really like when Rory tells Emily and Richard that she's going to Yale, and they get all excited and they come back. And it's that like scene that's in the opening credits. So I think probably those are my top two.
Yeah. And when we come back, we'll teach you the fight song.
Yeah, exactly.
So cute. Well, I love how they have to like hold back their excitement at first because they're not sure about Lorelai's reaction.
Yeah. They're like, oh, okay, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, great answer too, because I think Friday Night's All Right for Fighting is not only, it's my favorite Friday night dinner scene, but I think it's one of my favorite scenes from the show and the revival overall, because what you said is absolutely correct. Like, they acted the heck out of that scene.
Yeah.
It was shot geniusly, but if you didn't have the four of them there with the skills and the chops that they had at that point to back up that writing and back up that camera work, that scene would have never been what it was.
Exactly. Yeah. Like the camera angles and stuff, and obviously are really cool, but I think what makes it is just their ability to portray that tension. And I just love that it really just like juts back and forth with the different conversations. And they even go all the way back to like, why didn't you marry Christopher? So you can just tell that like they're in this for hours, and we're only really getting a taste of it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing I like about it is that it is so memorable because there's nothing else like it, even on this show.
Yep.
It stands kind of alone in its approach to this moment, and it just feels like such a huge cathartic moment where everything just gets put out on the table. Pun not intended, but I like it. But like, it's just so different and like satisfying to watch them just go at it like this, because there's probably been a lot of it bubbling under the surface for a very long time.
Yeah. Also, a quick fun question: deep frying a turkey, yes or no?
That is another thing I avoided. It really intimidated me, mostly because I live in an apartment, so I just don't really have the space to be doing that. I mean, I live in Texas, so like I say yes to deep frying anything. That's like what we do here. We have a whole competition at our state fair for it, but I think it would be fun to try, but I don't know. I think it got overhyped on the show for sure, but maybe it was more like a newer concept when that episode came out.
Yeah,
maybe. I feel like over the years, and I don't even think it's stemming from Gilmore Girls, but I feel like every Thanksgiving that goes by, I just always hear of more police reports or incidents the following day of just people lighting their houses on fire or lighting their lawns on fire because they were trying to deep fry their turkeys. And I feel like every year that just escalates. So
yeah,
it's unfortunately becoming
I don't know how to. I mean, I will give it props to Jackson. Like, he had the like protective gear on. I mean, yes, they had a small grass fire, but I think that was from deep frying other stuff beyond the turkey.
Yeah, Jackson was safe and like conscientious about it. And then the booze started flowing and all care just went right out the window.
Yep.
Again, jumping off of that. Okay, sticking with that episode. Out of those 4 Thanksgivings that we saw our Gilmore Girls attend, which one would you want to attend most? And which one would you want to avoid like the plague?
I always say Sookie for that episode because, again, I think she's really talented. I know she kind of lets Jackson take the lead on the turkey, but I think I just think it'd also be fun, have a couple margaritas, just chill outside. The vibes are very Stars Hollow there. I think Richard and Emily would have great food, but the drama in that episode was a little much, especially, I don't know if you guys know this, but I actually am a college counselor. And so that episode in particular, that whole like Rory applying to college, I have a lot of feelings about. And so I think it would be hard to attend that dinner just with my like day job and not going off on Lorelai in that episode, or in that scene. So probably that one would be my least favorite.
That's really cool. We have an episode coming up on university admissions. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We're both big like nerds and we like school, so we like talking about that.
Yeah, that's really fun.
But neither of us is a professional like you. So a whole other level. But
yeah,
Laura,
kudos to you. That is a very important and admirable career path. And just investing in students' lives in that way. I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Kate, you were going to say something.
I wanted to know your answer to that question as well.
Yes, and then I want yours. I would also be most inclined and wanting to attend Sookie's Thanksgiving because, again, I am all about that like summer barbecue backyard party feel to things. And even though this was granted like on their front lawn, same thing. You're not going to have to twist my arm to get me to come over to your party or your house. If you're just saying like, just come over for the afternoon or for the evening, we'll kick back with a couple drinks, maybe listen to some music, shoot the, what, and just hang out and talk. Like I could do without the deep frying. We don't need to deep fry shoes and potentially small children. But I like that atmosphere. And that's where I would head first. I think I would actually I was going to like start ranking them, but that's not what you're asking. The one that I would
you ask the question, you do what you want.
Yeah. Okay. So fine. I will rank them. I'll follow that up with going to Luke's because again, I know the food is predominantly going to be solid. And I know that when I'm there, I'm not going to get pressured into talking about anything if I don't want to, or just risque topics or, it just be so white collared in the way that I think that Emily and Richard's parties would have been. So that would be number 2. 3 and 4 are hard because again, I feel like just the atmosphere is so like, I'm going to be uncomfortable at either one of these places right now. From a food perspective, I would probably say Emily and Richard would be number 3 because I'm going to be more likely to eat what they cook and provide as opposed to eggless egg sandwiches or just, wheat balls or something. So I feel like the food is going to be better at Emily and Richard's. And so for that, I'll like suck up the uncomfortability. And then as much as I love Lane and as much as I love Mrs. Kim, I feel like they'd probably be my last choice because, again, I feel like the food's just going to be a bit too weird. There's not going to be much fun socialization, so I'd probably rank that last.
I don't know. You have the good Dave Rogowski vibes there. So
that's fair.
He's serenading you all day.
That's fair. I don't know if it's enough, though.
Because he only has eyes for Lane, so
yeah. But you can just enjoy his music. He's so talented.
That's true. My ranking is pretty much exactly the same as Laura's. It's closer for Sookie and Luke than I would think, because Jackson's family is a little rambunctious for my liking. But yeah, sitting outside and drinking with Sookie sounds like a lot of fun. She's a hilarious drunk, and that's one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. And Luke's would be like so much more chill and would be very traditional, which I kind of like. And then, yeah, the Gilmores would be uncomfortable, but I'm a vegetarian, and even I wouldn't eat that tofurkey at the Kims. So I'm out. It would be just so like, so strict and so like uncomfortable. Like she doesn't even appreciate the chocolate turkeys. Come on.
That's fair.
Yep. Okay. Another question for you. We're just gonna. I hope you don't mind, Larisa. We're just
it's what I'm here for.
With you left and right. So the Gilmore Girls, Lorelai and Rory specifically, they obviously have a very focused diet. And I say that loosely because the diet is pizza and diner food and candy bars and just everything that is just so unhealthy for anyone to be consuming on such a regular basis. And then we see how Emily and Richard eat in terms of meal preparation and what they have their staff cook for them and provide for them. How do you feel food ties into social status in that way?
Yeah, I think that's honestly, and I don't know if this has really been discussed a whole lot, but I think it can be boiled down to income. There's, it's an income, social class. I think plays a big part in it. Richard and Emily obviously are very wealthy. They have the resources to have a private chef and a wait staff to serve them these really great meals. And I don't know if you've really broken down Lorelai. I think it may, obviously when she was first starting out with Rory, she was a lot poorer, but I think they act like she has a lot less money than I think she does. Like her house is very nice, especially in Connecticut. Like I think she has a little bit more money than the show acts like, but I think it is a really good commentary that for a lot of people that come from lower income backgrounds, junk food is cheaper. Processed food is more affordable. Food deserts are real. They don't have really great grocery stores. Fast food, there's a McDonald's almost around every corner. But Whole Foods are few and far between, especially, and they're way more expensive. So I think that there is some subtle commentary maybe on, the difference between Lorelai's eating habits and Richard and Emily in terms of like social class. But I do think in terms of specifically Lorelai, it's more of her wanting to just rebel against her parents and that strict upbringing. And so everything that she does essentially is to rebel against her upbringing, including the junk food. I think is just something to kind of like, okay, well, I grew up eating really strict and now I'm going to like let it all go. But I think you could argue that there is a little bit of social commentary tied in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are excellent points. And you can definitely see it in certain episodes, like the Pop-Tart rant comes to mind where she's like,
yep, I just did that one.
Yeah, it's so good. Like, do I actually like Pop-Tarts or do I just like them because my mom would be horrified?
Right.
So like, that's such a poignant moment for her to have where she's like, oh my God, what do I actually like?
Right.
And then even when Rory takes over the DAR event in season 6 and she changes the menu and Richard's like, it's so nice to have edible food. And she's like, we always have good food, but you have fancy good food.
Yeah.
So there are these like levels of class commentary that you can find with the food on the show. Like all of Emily's food is a production, whereas, Luke's food is very like simple and basic. And then Sookie is somewhere in the middle where she likes the creativity. And yeah, so excellent point.
It's also interesting too. The like two main times that we really see Rory cooking were both for one of her boyfriends. Like she does the Damn Donna Reed episode where she makes that whole meal for Dean. I think most of it's processed. But I mean, the girl makes steak, so I don't know how Rory learned to make a steak. And then in Vineyard Valentine, where she's like, "Oh, Logan, I always like to cook." So that I never really thought about that. But I was just thinking that the only two times we really see her cook are in relation to one of her boyfriends.
That's a really good point. And Lorelai's kind of the opposite, where like she tends to find guys who can cook for her.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like part of the seduction process. Like when she calls Luke the perfect man because he makes her all that food.
Exactly.
She calls him hotter than Willy Wonka.
I mean, the path to Lorelai's heart is easy.
Yeah.
When you know what you need to do in that regard. So,
yeah. Oh, and like going back to the class thing and sort of the money thing. The only time we really see Lorelai with ingredients in her house is when she's struggling financially, and Rory calls her out on it as well. So it's, you know, it's unusual for her to make anything besides, you know, tater tots, which relatable. I mean, it's pretty much the extent of my cooking capability. So who am I to talk?
Mm-hmm. But I think that's also, like, you made me think about it now, why we've seen such a not even like a resurgence, because I feel like it's such a new thing within the past 10 or 15 years, but all of like the meal providers and the kits that you can buy into, and the monthly programs like HelloFresh and Blue Apron, and you know, just paying a weekly or a monthly fee to have those meals brought to you. I think it stems from people wanting to eat healthier, but I think it also stems from the fact that the just price of groceries have gone up. So for if you're single, that's one thing, but I feel like for even a 2-person household, you can go to the store and buy groceries for 2, and the bill is just adding up so quickly these days, where you get to checkout and you're like, I have like 6 things in my cart and I'm already at like $75. What is happening?
Yeah. I say this all the time now, but with inflation and everything, I'm like, I picked a really bad time to run a food blog. Like this last like year or so, it's been a little tough, especially with the egg spike with prices. That was really kind of tough. Luckily, I had already made my souffle and all the deviled eggs before that, so that was a relief. But yeah, it is getting really tough for a lot of families. And I think, you know, this show ended right before the last major recession in 2008. So I do think it would be very interesting to see how they would have, if they would have tied that in. I don't think they really talk too much about like current or political issues. I mean, they did to an extent politically wise, but I don't think too much with like things that were like currently going on a whole lot. So I didn't even know if they would really touch on the recession, if that would affect the show at all. But it is kind of interesting to think about.
Mm-hmm. And it makes me think of like food and domesticity. Like Lorelai grew up with maids and cooks, and so she probably never learned how to cook.
Yeah.
So how do you think that factors into their lifestyle?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and when she did grow up, she went to the inn, and they probably had cooks there that made food for her, because they were letting her stay there, and they probably gave her food that way. And so, yeah, she probably just never even had the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. Do you think that even if she did, though, that she would have cooked for herself, or was like what we see from her, you know, in the show, is she just so ingrained in the takeout lifestyle now with food, where she could know how to cook, but it's still just going to be pizza and Chinese food and whatever Al is coming up with this week all day, every day?
Yeah, because I think there is a sort of like quote unquote quirkiness to it, is how this show kind of likes to portray it. I think with all her like pop culture references and all this food, like it's almost just like part of her personality, and like, oh, she's this like kind of goofy girl who eats kind of weird food. I mean, it's not that weird, but you know, she eats junk food all the time. Like, that's so quirky. So yeah, I think even if she did know, she probably wouldn't. But it is also interesting kind of how, and I think this is just a lapse of how, you know, writers go in and out of the show, and they obviously don't remember what they did. But there's a scene like really early on. I think it's the Christmas episode in season 1 where Lorelai is like eating bagged salad, like she dumps the ranch in. But then they act like, oh, lettuce essence is our vegetable quota for the week. Like, it's so funny how like they'll like act like, okay, she'll eat healthy like occasionally, but if she's craving an apple, that means she's pregnant. Like that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, that's a good one that I didn't even have in my notes, was the apple when she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the fact that they made sort of being world champion eaters a huge personality point for Lorelai and Marie?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that point we talked about earlier of, you know, that was kind of unheard of at that time. Like everyone was going for that like heroin chic look is what they called it, like that very real thin, unfortunately. And obviously like it evolved a little bit than how it was really bad in the 90s, but I think in the early 2000s, like it was still like, I think of that like Jessica Simpson when they were calling her fat and everything. And it's like, it's really frustrating. So I think to an extent, like they were pushing boundaries with just talking about food all the time and having their characters eat all the time. But like we said, like they probably didn't go about it in the best way.
Yeah. Laura, do you have any feelings on that one?
Don't do it.
It's too late for that now.
Yeah, but like even just in thinking about this episode, like I just had a lot of thoughts even today just about Super Size Me and that film, and just, Morgan Spurlock experimenting with eating that for 30 days, which wasn't probably too far off from what our Gilmore women were doing in terms of what they were ingesting. And after 20 or so days, this man had gained 30 pounds. His doctors were like, you're probably going to have a heart attack tomorrow. And that's not even a joke. Like, your levels are scary right now. And I think back to, and I just equate that to how we see our women eating. And we never see any negative reciprocations or anything like that coming to the forefront for them. And granted, yes, they could have great metabolisms. They could have, good genes and just, a good biology in terms of what like they've been passed on from their family that is just allowing them to live and consume food in that way without needing to worry about that. But it just seems so unrealistic that they would have never had any of those issues become prevalent, whether it's high cholesterol or diabetes or any of those health scares that I think would stem from them eating in the way that they do.
Yeah, we never see them go to the doctor except when Rory breaks her arm. Like, we have no idea whether they're getting regular checkups or whether their doctors are concerned about their eating habits. We don't even know, like, does Lorelai have insurance? Your country is really messed up on that front. Like, can they even get medical or nutritional care? Like, but it doesn't matter because they're these fantasy figures who can just eat whatever they want and stay slim.
Yeah.
It makes me think of Dean too. Like when he says, wow, you can eat. And she's like, yeah. Oh, wait, that's bad.
Yeah. But I will say, like, I would still take this over the, like, oh, well, don't eat it all, the, like, eating disorder plot lines that we saw, like, in every sitcom in the early 2000s and the 90s. Like, I do appreciate that this was, like, a different approach. And, like, there's a lot of body shaming that does happen in this episode. Even in A Year in the Life, there's like a very long scene of body shaming, which was very uncomfortable in 2016. I mean, it's uncomfortable at any time, but it especially for the times, it felt even worse. So I'm not saying like, oh, well, they handled that perfectly by any means, but I do say that I appreciate that it was a different approach to the usual, like, oh, don't eat anything, be really thin. Like, they are thin, but I like that it wasn't necessarily like a major plot point, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Do you wish that there would have been any changes, like personally, with how the show portrayed food?
I mean, I think it's almost like you said, kind of these fictional, fantastical characters. So I mean, I think that to expect like, okay, because like, we don't always see a character exercising. Obviously, we know the Gilmores don't because they talk about how much they hate it. But like, we just assume, okay, this character on the show is relatively fit. They probably work out in free time, but we're not going to see that on camera. So I don't know if I would necessarily say yes, change something, because I think the food on the show is, obviously I'm a little bit biased, but I think it's such a big part of the show. I definitely think we could have done without all the body shaming jokes. But I think that food is kind of portrayed in a fun way. And I think for the most part, people aren't watching Gilmore Girls to be like, I'm going to eat just like Rory and Lorelai all the time. Like, I think we just kind of do it of like, okay, this sounds great, but I'm not going to eat burgers every single day for every single meal. That was a long-winded response. I apologize.
No, we want to hear all of your thoughts. Trust
we
us.
talk enough. We want to listen to you.
Yeah. Gearing back towards what you're doing, what is on the horizon for you now as you're getting closer to the end of the show? Is there anything that you could spoil or talk about in terms of the recipes and the ideas and what's coming up next for you?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do a year in the life. I haven't entirely decided how many dishes per episode. I'm kind of between 3 to 4 just because they are longer than the original ones. After that, I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break just because this has been a lot since 2020. And it'll be 2024 by the time I finish with A Year in the Life. But I have toyed around with going back and doing a couple of the dishes that I passed over just because there's a lot of episodes where they have like an entire feast or like several things, and I'm always torn between a couple. So I might go back and do that, but I'm not committing to that yet because I don't know, by the time I'm done, I might just want to be done. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any, I'll say this as a follow-up. In terms of like, what are some of your favorite things to cook? Do you like fruits and vegetable dishes? Do you like, maybe cooking like chicken, pork, steak more, like, or desserts or like baking? What's your favorite thing to do and create?
Yeah. So I think in terms of this project, I would say I like a lot of the desserts because I do really like baking. And before this project, I mean, my baking was pretty much limited to like Christmas parties or events for other people because obviously like I don't want to have a ton of baked goods at home. So when I did start this in the middle of the pandemic, it was really hard because like my freezer was just packed all the time because it's just me and my sister and we couldn't eat everything. But now it's a little bit easier because I can share my stuff out. So I have really enjoyed that, just getting to bake a lot more. But in my personal life, I'm pretty much open to trying pretty much all foods. Like there's a few that I'm just like, no, like ketchup. But I wouldn't say that there's like a particular type of food that I love cooking the most. I guess it's just kind of whatever I'm in the mood for is kind of what I gravitate towards. But I will say once the weather does finally start cooling down, I become the biggest soup girly. Like if I could have soup every day, all winter long, I would. It's just so warm and comforting. So yeah, I'm a really big soup person.
Do you find that there's, I mean, I think the answer is probably yes, but how do you think then food equates to just comfort and maybe even just being, a go-to as like a feel good at the end of the day when you might not even necessarily be hungry, but you want to use food as like escapism, but also again, maybe just like, I just need a comfort food right now in the same way that sometimes we need this show as a comfort show when we've had a tough day.
Again, I think this is kind of like a double-edged sword because I think the process and the art of cooking can be very therapeutic. It can be really relaxing for some people, but it can also be very stressful for other people, which is very valid, right? There's a lot that can go wrong in the kitchen. And so like that can be very stressful and not relaxing at all. For me, I do really enjoy cooking. I hate the cleanup process. And so that sometimes will just like put me off of cooking altogether. Cause I hate having to do the dishes. It's like one of my least favorite chores. But in terms of comfort foods, I think it's hard because I think like we get so stigmatized in like, I think the idea of like comfort food is like equated to cheat days, which is equated to diet culture. So like it can go all the way back with the layers. Like I'm kind of in the belief of like, if you want the cookie, like eat the cookie, like it doesn't necessarily need to be a reward. You don't have to like cheat and things like that. Like if you want to eat it, eat it. But obviously if you're eating like a pack of Oreos every day because you want the Oreos every day, like that also cannot be great for your health either. So I think it's just a matter of listening to your body and figuring out what you actually want. But also kind of learning why you want food. Like, is it just because you're bored? Because that for a lot of people, when they're bored, like they are like, oh, I need a snack or I need a graze. So it's like, are you actually hungry or are you bored? Are you wanting ice cream because you need to wallow over your breakup? Or are you craving something sweet? Like kind of figuring those things out, I think is really important. So I don't know. It's hard because I think people should get to eat what they want, but also like don't go overboard either.
Everything in moderation, except Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent connection, Laura. Like food is comforting and the show is comforting, and like food is used as comfort a lot on the show, as is unfortunately alcohol at times. But like, it just sometimes watching them eat comfort food makes you feel comforted. There's like this weird connection with like watching other people eat that can almost make you feel satisfied sometimes, and it's like this weird phenomenon that I don't understand because it just makes me hungry, but it happens for some people like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping for anyone who has watched you in the past, who is still watching you currently, any new viewers that you may gain going forward, for anyone who's absorbing your content and following you, what do you hope is the biggest takeaway that anyone is getting from what you're doing and what you're creating?
I think it would kind of be that, like, if you want to eat something that is necessarily considered a bad food, like, I think you should not feel guilty about it. Like, I think we have so much shame attached to a lot of certain foods. And I feel like people hopefully can lose some of that guilt and that shame on eating certain foods. And I think another thing would to be to like just have fun with cooking and baking. Like obviously, like I said, for everyone, it's not for everyone. Like it stresses people out. But I think if that's something you're wanting to get into, you should just try it. I didn't think that I was going to cook 7 seasons of Gilmore Girls, and here I am. So like you can bake those cookies, or you can make that like fancy French food if you want. Like you just keep practicing and you'll get there. So I guess those are kind of my 2 biggest takeaways, I would say.
It's a very like Sookie answer. We're like, enjoy food. Yeah, like she's one of the few characters who doesn't seem to have any hangups about food unless you're trying to stifle her creativity when it comes to what she wants to make.
Right.
Yeah. So I think she's a great example.
Yeah. Or unless you're critiquing her risotto.
Huge. Well, it's magic, so you shouldn't critique it.
Yeah. It'll extend your life.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. She's a real good role model, I think, for like how we should be with food.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, like just character-wise, like she definitely had her faults. I mean, the show would be boring if the characters didn't, but I think she was a really good friend to Lorelai in a lot of ways when Lorelai wasn't necessarily a good friend back. I think she was a really good kind of moral compass a lot of the time. Not always, but a lot of the time. And I do think in the sense of good, supportive friend characters, like obviously I think in the Gilmore fandom, she's very beloved, but I think beyond that, she kind of gets overlooked as a good quality character and a good friend character. And it's always interesting too, when people that didn't watch Gilmore Girls like find out, because Melissa McCarthy is obviously super big now, but for very different types of media. So it's always funny when like people discover her on Gilmore Girls, because she's very different than the Melissa McCarthy is now.
Yeah, it's one of the few like times when she's actually a character as opposed to kind of just playing herself.
Yeah.
But I ain't mad. I love it when she plays herself.
Yeah, exactly.
She's so funny.
A fun little insert is that I did just see a question being posed and circulated on social media within the past week, like asking Melissa what she thinks Sookie would be up to now. And the response is that she thinks her and Jackson have 13 kids and they grow edibles.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing. But also, I guess that I don't know, that whole vasectomy plotline is very, very bad and problematic. But I guess that means he never went and got it. If they're having 13 kids.
Yeah. We'll get to that one.
Yeah, go sleep outside with the plants.
Yeah. Okay. Now it reminds me of that time when one of Sookie's some of Jackson's employees, he said, go weed the back patch, and then they ended up growing weed. And then they had to try to like sneak it out. Oh, that was so funny.
I know.
It's funny looking at that in the 2020s now, and like it's legal in Canada. I can go down the street and buy like beverages and gummies and cookies with it in it, just like no big deal.
Yeah, it's so interesting like what has changed in the time that it's been off air.
Yeah, so she's probably not that far. Like Connecticut's pretty lax, I think.
Yeah, hopefully more of the states get there.
Yes.
Agreed. Nice. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't even live there, and I'm like, it's kind of a BS policy in the first place, since it's very like racist.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wind this down just again with throwing some, not rapid fire, but just maybe some fun, quick Gilmore Girls questions at you, unrelated to food, but just show centered regardless.
Sure.
Okay. Favorite show character and why?
So I have to say Richard on this one, which I know is not the most popular, but I really love him. I think he has good character growth. And I'm just I don't like to be basic, and everyone loves Lorelai, and I do too, but so I have to pick Richard just to be different.
Least favorite?
Oh, least favorite? I know I have quite a few. Anna for sure. If I had to pick like top least, I really don't like Anna Nardini.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I don't think I have to explain that one.
No.
Yeah. Message received.
Yep.
Favorite season? Including the revival, if you need to go
there. This one's hard. I've never been able to pick just one season, because there's episodes that I truly love from every single season, but I don't know if I have one like as a whole. I will say my controversial answer, my favorite episode is actually in season 7, which I know is kind of blasphemous in the Gilmore Girls fandom, but my favorite episode is actually the like series finale. I think they tie up everything so beautifully, especially with the parallels at Luke Steiner. I think they do a really great send off to Rory and kind of tie up a lot of storylines. And it's a very emotional episode. Like I still cry every time I watch it. So I know season 7 is like a taboo season, but that's my favorite episode.
No, I agree with you. That is it's not my favorite, but I do love that one. And like, I get tingles every time I hear, Inside Out by the Mighty Lemon Drops.
Yeah, for sure.
Who would you want to have sit down to dinner with the most on the show? Doesn't have to necessarily be your favorite character, but
Sookie for sure, just because I would have known she would have eaten it. And I think we would just have a really great conversation. We're very similar. I'd want to ask about all her like cooking techniques. So that would be my answer for that one.
Mm-hmm. Kate, anything you want to ask?
Any like hot takes on anything? Just like something you want to throw out there where you're like, I have to talk about this.
I mean, I think I kind of did with my Luke takes. I will say, and I don't know how you feel about this, I claim to be a Dean apologist. I don't think he's necessarily the best boyfriend. Like I said, I think they were all right at the time. I think he gets a lot more hate by a lot of the fans than Jess and Logan do for being just as flawed. Like, I'm not like saying, oh, it's okay to cheat on your wife or anything like that. Like, I don't forgive and apologize for that. But I think a lot of the stuff that fans critique him for and hate him for could be said for two reasons. One, he's a 17-year-old boy with his brain is not developed. And two, like Rory emotionally cheated on him with Jess. Like she dragged him on for way too long. I think he reacted a fair way in a lot of regards. And then my last kind of point with both Dean and Luke is that they're actually very similar characters. If you actually like sit down with both of them at like a comparison level, like I think Luke gets lifted up a lot, and Dean gets hated on a lot, but they're actually very similar at the end of the day, if you think about it.
Good answer.
Yeah.
That is a great answer, and I will have to think about that some more now.
Yeah, for sure. Sit with it, and you're going to start realizing like, oh, they're actually similar in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to think about that or admit it, but I will give it its due diligence and fair thought process. Yeah. So, yep. Kind of something that we've posed already, but just what is next on the horizon for you in terms of what you've got coming up?
Yeah, so the big thing obviously is wrapping up seasons, I guess not even wrapping up, but getting through season 7 since I'm still early on in that. And then moving into a year in the life. I might do another cooking challenge I've thought about. So I don't know if you guys know about this, but last fall I did this big 8-week cooking challenge where we had a prompt every week and people could recreate their own dishes kind of from the show fitting or from the different theme. And that was a lot of fun getting to see everyone kind of join in the Gilmore Girls cooking movement. So I might do something not quite as big scale, but something kind of similar to that. Maybe once I start wrapping things up.
That does sound delightful.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And if you do it, I can't wait to see it.
For sure.
So for anyone who does want to perhaps check out your content who isn't already following you or knows of you, where can you be found on social media or on the interwebs? Where can people go to look for you and your content?
Yeah, so my blog is eatinggilmore.com. It's where I have all of my recipes. So if you want to create your own Gilmore Girls food, it's really easy to follow. I go against the grain. I put the recipe right up at the top. I know most food blogs don't do that. They make you scroll. I hate that. So it's at the very top every time. And then I am on Instagram and TikTok at Eating Gilmore.
Awesome. Please go check out Larisa. Again, her content and her recipes and everything that she is doing is wonderful. So you are missing out if you are not following her. And we will have all of her links and everything for her information included in the video description below. So again, please just go check her out. You will not be disappointed. And your stomach will thank you. And your
taste buds.
And your taste buds and your palate. What is coming up next for us, though, on the Gilmore Way?
Next week, we're going to continue this conversation and talk more about like the heavier diet culture-y side of the food on the show. We're going to go even deeper than we got to go this week. So, there will be some trigger warnings for that one. So keep your eyes peeled. But I'm really excited to talk about that because I have a lot of thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's next week for us. In the meantime, please go back and watch some of our old videos if you need more content. We just did one with Jenny Whitaker, the creator and organizer of the FanFest Society. And we were also joined by Jess and her husband, Charlie, of Oi with the Cups Already. So please go watch that video. If you don't know about FanFest and you're needing more Gilmore Girls in your life, we break down the convention weekend that is happening this fall in Algonquin, Maine. Please go watch that and consider buying a ticket to that event if you have not already done so. We will include that link in the description below as well. And in the meantime, please just remember to do all those YouTube things for us. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel. It's one click and it really does help us out. And again, go check out Larisa and everything that she does as well. You will not be disappointed. And yeah.
Well, thank you guys both so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate talking to both of you. It was a lot of fun.
Of course. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time out to sit down with us. This was a blast. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. In the meantime, enjoy your weekend and we will see you next Friday night for dinner.
Bye.
Bye.